Welcome to this explanation of the port call process, which describes every step of a ship calling at a port. This process is now part of the IMO guidelines on implementing a maritime single window. The business process consists of two phases, a contractual phase and an operational phase. To make things easier, let's look at each phase in isolation. Firstly, let's look at the contractual phase. It is important to understand the contractual aspect of the port call process, which is based on BIMCO contracts. The terms in these contracts influence how ships operate. Every merchant ship is contracted to carry goods and/or is subject to a hiring agreement. There are four contract types. 1. A contract of sale. This contract may be absolute or conditional depending upon the desire of contracting parties. 2. A contract for hiring ships. If the party responsible for transport does not own a vessel needs to be hired, otherwise known as chartered. The charterer needs to sign a contract with the vessel owner or operator, the so-called charter party. It's crucial to understand if the chartered ship will fit at both the load and the discharge port and berth, for which correct and updated port and berth information is needed. 3. A final contract of sale. After signing up the charter party, the final contract of sale of goods can be signed. 4. A terminal contract. A contract to load, discharge, and even store the goods. If there is no fixed contract with the discharge terminal, a storage contract or terminal service agreement needs to be signed between cargo buyer or seller and the terminal. Secondly, let's look at the operational phase. It is important to understand that parties in the operational phase have been assigned and operate according to the agreements in the contractual phase. The operational phase can be divided into three parts. 1. Sailing the ship to the berth. 2. Cargo and vessel services at the berth. 3. Sailing the ship from the berth. Part 1 is sailing the ship to the berth. In the contractual phase, it is agreed that the ship will fit at the berth, in the so-called safe port clause of the charter party. In this phase, it's about when the berth is available and when the ship can enter the port to reach the berth, depending on availability of nautical services, the fairway, and weather or tidal conditions. The planning of both berth and port are based on the same concept as booking a train or flight ticket. Estimated time of arrival, or ETA, comes from the ship manager. Requested time of arrival, or RTA, comes from the berth and port planner. Planned time of arrival, or PTA, confirmation, comes from the ship manager to the berth and port planner. Besides these agreements between operational people, timely clearance of the vessel is needed prior to berth by the authorities, such as customs, immigration, health, and port authorities. Part 2 is cargo and vessel services at the berth. Cargo services are crucial. They're the core reason for a ship to visit a berth. The berth time will only be optimized if loading and unloading operations proceed smoothly. Coordinating all vessel services, such as bunker providers, provision suppliers, crew change services, is vital too, so they don't affect the cargo handling services and are all completed before cargo operations are done. The planning of all services is based on the same principles. Estimated time of starting, or ETS, and completion service, ETC, comes from the service provider. Requested time of starting, or RTS, and completion services, RTC, comes from the ship manager. Planned time of starting, or PTS, and completion services, PTC, comes from the service provider to the ship manager. Aside from agreements between operational people, the timely clearance of the terminal security is vital for these service providers. Rest hour time planning of the crew on board must be accounted for too, especially in ports where many services are provided in a short time frame. Part 3 is sailing the ship from the berth. This phase concerns when the ship can leave the berth and port, depending on availability of nautical services, the fairway, and weather or tidal conditions. The planning of the ship's departure from port is the same as that of arrival, namely, estimated time of departure, or ETD, from the ship manager, requested time of departure, or RTD, from the port planner, planned time of departure, or PTD, confirmation comes from the ship manager to the port planner. Besides these agreements between operational people, timely clearance of the vessel is needed prior to the departure by the authorities, such as customs, immigration, health, and port authorities. Port call process datasets. Based on both the contractual and operational phases, 3 kinds of data sets exist for interchange. The use of standardized data sets for all 3 data types will ultimately influence how efficiently all parties can exchange data with each other during a port call. This is extremely important as ships operate in a huge network of up to 2,000 ports and 6,000 terminals around the world. Having different definitions and units of measurement for every port of call and each terminal in the port makes it impossible to operate fleets of hundreds of ships in a safe and efficient manner. The first dataset is the nautical data. This is the data provided by hydrographic offices or similar service providers, which is used for safe navigation. This data is used to check if the ship will fit at the berth and for safe berth-to-berth voyage planning and navigation. The migration from physical maps to digital ones is underway and will require using IHO standards to ensure global uniformity. The second dataset is operational data. This is data which is submitted to non-authority parties as part of planning or execution of certain operations. This data is used to plan arrival and departure times of the ship and the starting and completion time of nautical, cargo and vessel services. The migration from faxes, telephone calls and emails to software systems interconnected using application program interfaces or APIs is underway. These will need to exchange data using minimum IMO and ISO standards as the basis to ensure global uniformity and create the opportunity for efficiency improvements in ship-shore communications. The third and final dataset is administrative data. This involves data submitted by ships or other non-authority parties to authorities based on legislation or regulations. This data consists of notifications and declarations made to authorities. The migration from manual, paper-based, port-specific notifications and declarations to a digitalized single-truth data submission on a one-to-many basis under a maritime single window is underway, with IMO setting the target of January 2024 for implementation by member states. Using IMO and ISO standards to ensure global and harmonized data uniformity will be a crucial success factor in optimizing port calls. For nautical data, the IHO, or International Hydrographic Organization, is the de facto standard, and its adoption for digital data will be a major step forward in harmonizing data in port information manuals for all ships. For operational data and administrative data, it is the IMO, or International Maritime Organization, and ISO, the International Standardization Organization, which offer basic minimum data standards which ports, their governments, and port communities can use to build robust and sustainable maritime single windows, port community systems, and port management systems. For more details, please consult one of the following links. And for more information on International Taskforce port call optimization's work in this field, contact secretary.ihma at harbourmaster.org. For more information on the Maritime Single Window, a Window of Opportunities campaign by the IMO, BIMCO and IPH with the support of IPSCA, contact Martina Mfontanet Soleil on the following email: mfontanet@imo.org.